When then shall we say the concepts for the Bill of Rights? This most significant American document came into the consciousness of man. Have these rights always existed? Or are they a necessary consequence of evolution? Or do we, in defining them, bring them into being? The Middle East, cradle of civilization, where was born the concept that every human being is significant. England, the Magna Carta, King John, Runnymede, free elections, judicial reforms, rights. Settlers claim the rights of English common law, a contract between king and people.
Hello?
Free speech, right to a jury trial.
Hi. You might not have guessed it from this, but the Bill of Rights is actually something more than just a piece of paper written 200 years ago. It's actually something we live by every day. As Americans, most of our daily life is based upon it.
Was not always the case.
This guy's got to go.
So,
all right, yeah! Thank you very much. You guys are beautiful. Okay. So, how does the Bill of Rights affect us today?
We haven't gotten to that yet.
Well, Penny, it's not something we get to. It's part of the way you live. Hey, you, Picasso! How does the Bill of Rights affect you?
It doesn't.
Really?
Listen, they wrote the thing hundreds of years ago, right? And it works, right? So, why should I care how it works?
Well, do you guys ever think what might happen if we didn't have the Bill of Rights?
I mean, what could happen to you if all of our rights were removed, like right now?
Court will never let you get away with this.
No court and no trial. Let's go. Quick, do you have a stapler?
No!
Does anyone have any tape? I want to call a lawyer. Without my lawyer, wild horses couldn't drag me out of here. What's this?
Hey, that's private.
Did you write this dribble?
I take fifth.
There is no fifth.
Okay, you made your point. So where'd this come from?
Let's go. This is Philadelphia State House, the site of the 1787 Constitutional Convention. It's where the delegates from 13 different states met to decide what sort of government the newly formed United States should have. Right here is where the Bill of Rights was first proposed.
Come to order. Please, let us not waste our time.
By now, everyone was in a hurry to get the 4-month-long convention over with. Originally, they hadn't planned on writing an entirely new constitution. The original task was to simply revise the Articles of Confederation.
Articles of what?
The Articles of Confederation, silly. The nation's first document of government before the Constitution. But it soon became clear that during the convention that an entirely new national government needed to be constructed because the first one was far too weak.
Why?
Well, most of the power was left to the states, who were in constant disagreement and worried about protecting their own interest. In the beginning, the United States was far less united than they are today. In fact, they were like 13 different countries. The government of Rhode Island didn't even send a delegate to the convention. Georgia was about to declare war on the Creek Indians. Hey, Papa, hey, help me. And the state of New York was speaking to the Viceroy of Canada with thoughts of seceding from the Union. Because of all this, in 1787, the government was on very shaky ground.
The chair recognizes George Mason, the delegate from Virginia.
Gentlemen, I believe the Constitution should be prefaced with a Bill of Rights, and I would second the motion if made for the purpose. It would give great quiet to the people, and with the aid of the state declarations, a bill might be prepared in a few hours.
Now, you have to understand that this is one of the hottest summers on record in Philadelphia. Because of this, these delegates didn't want to spend a second more in this assembly hall. Besides, they made a poor fashion choice for this sort of thing. But they had written a constitution, and it was ready to be sent out to the states to be ratified. They didn't want to think about a Bill of Rights.
For the laws of the federal government will be paramount to the laws and constitutions of the states, and the declarations of rights in the separate states are no security.
I so move that a committee prepare a Bill of Rights.
I second the motion.
Now, this could have stretched out the convention even longer, particularly if Patrick Henry, one of the Constitution's strongest opponents, had been in Philly at the time. You see, he had been known to make speeches lasting up to 7 hours. That's just way too long.
On the question for a committee to prepare a Bill of Rights, all in favor? All opposed?
And so the motion failed unanimously.
If it failed, then how did we get a Bill of Rights?
Don't you know anything? It was because of Thomas Jefferson. He wanted the Bill of Rights.
But I remember Alexander Hamilton was against it, and he was more powerful. Wasn't he?
Well, they were both very influential and outspoken men. Thomas Jefferson was a firm believer in the rights of the people. And although he was in France during these years, he sent many letters to other great American thinkers, expressing his point of view. Alexander Hamilton, on the other hand, was against a Bill of Rights. He was a Federalist. In other words, he believed in a national government stronger than the state governments. He felt the Bill of Rights could weaken the national government. Also, Hamilton's political adversaries, the Anti-Federalists, supported a Bill of Rights, and that helped set his opinion as well. The two men had a great difference of opinion on many things, and the Bill of Rights became one of their more important political battlegrounds.
Mr. Hamilton, I have a few words on the Constitution as proposed by our convention. I will now say what I do not like. First, the omission of a Bill of Rights providing clearly for freedom of religion, freedom of the press, protection against standing armies, habeas corpus laws, and trials by jury.
The most considerable objection to the Constitution is that it contains no Bill of Rights. But Bills of Rights are, in their origins, stipulations between kings and their subjects. They have no application to constitutions founded upon the power of the people.
Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth, general or particular, and what no just government should refuse.
The truth is that the Constitution is itself, in every rational sense and to every useful purpose, a Bill of Rights.
I must say it astonishes me that 3/4 of the people should be content to live under a system that leaves to their governors the power of taking from them the freedom of religion, the press, commerce, and yoking them with a standing army. This is a degeneracy in principles of liberty that I expected would take 4 centuries, not 4 years.
I go further and say Bills of Rights are not only unnecessary, but would even be dangerous. For by listing a bare minimum of rights, it implies that there are no others. Congress will, I presume, recommend certain amendments to render the structure of the government more secure. This will satisfy the more considerate and honest opposers of the Constitution.
We are now vibrating between too much and too little government. And I expect the pendulum will rest somewhere in the middle.
It was James Madison who found that middle ground. Although Madison was a Federalist, he slowly came around to Jefferson's view that a Bill of Rights was needed.
My own opinion has always been in favor of a Bill of Rights. At the same time, I never thought its omission to be a defect, nor have I been anxious to supply it for any other reason than for other people who anxiously desired it.
And desire it they did, for many states refused to accept the new Constitution without a Bill of Rights.
I can understand why.
The fight for ratification was one of the most dramatic political struggles this country's ever seen. And this is how it happened. Delaware was the first state to ratify the Constitution. Then there was Pennsylvania. Next came New Jersey and Georgia. And then the Constitution state, Connecticut. Then came Massachusetts, which included the land that later became the state of Maine. It was Massachusetts, with the help of John Hancock, that got the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists to agree to ratification by officially recommending the passage of a Bill of Rights. They called it a recommendation, but everybody knew it was more like a demand. Trouble came during the New Hampshire Convention, when they adjourned without ratifying. They were just plain tired. But they soon reconvened and ratified, and also recommended specific amendments. Next came Maryland and South Carolina to ratify. But following the others' leads, they too recommended specific amendments to protect certain rights. And incredibly, even Virginia ratified, against the highly vocal protests of Patrick Henry. In the end, 11 of the 13 states ratified the Constitution. North Carolina refused to ratify without a Bill of Rights. And finally, Rhode Island didn't call together a ratification convention. But all the states were promised a Bill of Rights. Now it was up to James Madison to draft it. And Madison was the perfect guy for the job because he understood that democracy and individual rights do not always go together.
Wait a minute, democracy and individual rights don't go together? I thought democracy is ruled by the people.
Democracy is ruled by a majority. And when majority rules, individual rights may be lost.
So, like how?
Well, what would happen if the majority voted to arrest people who spoke out against the government? What if they voted one national religion? What if they voted mime as the national pastime? What if they voted earplugs mandatory for rock concerts? What if they voted that,
Give me a break. People wouldn't do that today.
Oh?
Well, Americans wouldn't do that. Well, I wouldn't do that.
So is the idea that democracy needs some kind of protection against itself? So that the majority won't crush the individual?
You got it. And so James Madison set out to create that protection in the form of a Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments or additions to the Constitution. Madison studied the Magna Carta, the English Bill of Rights, and countless other documents, as well as more than 200 recommendations from the various state ratifying conventions. What Madison managed to do was satisfy both the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, for his Bill of Rights was structured so that it did not take any power away from the federal or the state governments. It only dealt with the rights of the individual. It was a difficult job for Madison because there were so many people to please. It was as complex and delicate as building a house of cards.
Welcome to the Bill of Rights. Pablo, Penny, come on down. Here's your first card.
First Amendment, freedom of speech.
Freedom of the press.
Freedom of religion.
And freedom of assembly.
The First Amendment contains 4 of our most important freedoms. People can speak out against injustice without fear of government retribution.
Publishers can print a free flow of ideas without government control.
People have the right to worship any religion that they choose without fear, and there is a strict separation of church and state.
People can gather for any peaceful purpose, in public or in private. The Second Amendment, right to keep and bear arms.
The issue was important 200 years ago because the original settlers were not allowed to have guns at all. And it's a right that's been debated by subsequent generations.
The Third Amendment, no standing army. No soldier shall be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner in time of peace or in time of war.
Without this amendment, anyone could be forced to house soldiers at any time.
The Fourth Amendment, no unreasonable search and seizure.
Protecting individuals and their homes and belongings from being searched without a search warrant. The Fifth Amendment,
Protection against self-incrimination. No one can be forced to incriminate oneself in a court of law. When someone pleads the Fifth, that's the part of the Fifth Amendment they're invoking.
no one can be held for a capital crime unless under indictment by a grand jury.
Right of due process of law. No one can be imprisoned, executed, or have property taken away without passing through the justice system.
Double jeopardy. No one may be tried twice for the same crime.
The Sixth Amendment. Speedy and public trial.
Anyone being prosecuted has the right to a trial by an impartial jury of peers in the state where the crime was committed.
And shall be informed of the accusation so that they know what they are being accused of.
And has the right to confront witnesses against him and to be allowed to find witnesses in their favor.
As well as having the right to counsel. In other words, to have a lawyer in their defense.
The Seventh Amendment. Juries in civil trials. In legal suits over money and property, one is also entitled to a trial by jury.
The Eighth Amendment. No excessive bail or fines. No cruel or unusual punishment.
The Ninth Amendment. Other rights retained by the people. Makes it clear that this Bill of Rights lists only some, and not all of the rights of the individuals. And finally, the Tenth Amendment. The power of the federal government. Any powers not given to the government in the Constitution are left to the states and the people. And now, 200 years later, the words that James Madison put down have held their strength. Through a civil war, 2 world wars, and others. It's held under the weight of prejudice, intolerance, fear, and even ignorance. But, like everything else, it could be lost if it's not taken care of. And if we don't take care of it.
Okay, check them out.
Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly.